And they're also installing some smaller 230 kilovolt lines to supply either specific data centers or to continue to loop the system. So they're taking power from basically Trap Rock over to Microsoft, the Becco to DTC line on our property. There's a new project that they just announced yesterday, which is going to be looping some data centers in Sterling off of the WNOD trail. That's this line. And then there's one down here near Willard Road. There's a couple data centers in here now, and they're looping that back into Fairfax County. So in the past, when land development has gotten plans that show water mains crossing these high voltage transmission lines, usually they've transitioned from ductile iron to plastic, but not in all cases. Sometimes they left the ductile and they did some cathodic protection. So that's what we're going to be looking at with this project. So when these new lines are coming in, we're having Dominion provide this corrosion and shock study for the new crossings that they're putting in. But for the older stuff, we never had them do that. So that's what this is going to be, looking back at the old existing pipeline. So what they're looking for, we've had Dominion provide 4 studies to us now, and they're working on their 5th. 3 of the 4 have found some problem with a shock hazard. They haven't found any corrosion issues yet, but basically what's happening is in steady state, there's no problem. So as long as the power line is running normally as it should, we don't have a problem with shock. The problem comes in when there's a fault in the line, and that can either be through a lightning hit to the tower or some other power surge that they're experiencing, either like a bird flew into the substation or some other reason why they're having a surge of power. And that can create a ground fault from the tower into the soil. And when the resistivity of the soil is low, the electricity can run through the soil much easier. And so when there is a shock hazard, that's what's happening. The soil is just conducting the electricity to our pipe. And if somebody happened to be standing there, they possibly could get shocked. So the likelihood of this occurring is very, very small, but the consequence could be fatal. And I think that's all I want to say on this. So the scope of work for this task order?
So you're saying when it's steady state, there's no problem?
No problem. So
normally the fluctuating magnetic field at 60 hertz doesn't induce any power into the ductile iron?
Not normally. Okay, that's what I did want to say. I'll go back.
Okay.
Okay. Right. So in ductile iron pipeline, traditionally, this has not been looked at. It's only been looked at on steel pipelines, really, for the gas industry. And that's because ductile iron is considered electrically discontinuous because it has gaskets in between each stick of pipe, whereas steel is welded together. So it's basically like a big, long wire underground. So on our raw water transmission main, where we are underneath the 500 kilovolt line, we had a lot of cathodic protection put in to try and keep the electric from coupling to our main. So we did think about it on that one because that's the only steel pipeline we really have.
When you say cathodic protection, you talk about anodes attached to the pipe?
Anodes, we have ground mats, we have some dielectric barriers to try and keep the current from being able to get to the pipe. Basically just plastic underground.
You also mentioned that Dominion had not done previous studies. Sounds like this is grandfathered in. I'm just trying to understand why aren't they responsible for doing a study on?
It's possible we went in after them.
Okay.
So that main drag, that big 500 kilovolt's been there for a long time. So we probably came in after the fact.
One other question. If they come in after the fact, aren't they responsible?
Yes. So that's what we've been doing. So if we're already there, if we're existing and they're coming in with these new ones, we're making them do these studies for us.
And are they paying for the cathodic protection?
Yes, they're paying for the mitigation. Anything else? All right.
Thank you.
So this scope of work, we are having the consultant look at all of the different spots where we think there may be a problem. So our consultant went through and they have the Dominion existing power lines and they have our water mains. And they basically circled everywhere where there was an overlap that we hadn't already done a report for. And it came out to be about 28 different locations that they're going to be looking at. So their first step is collect the electrical data from Dominion for each one of these lines, collect all of the data from us on do we have cathodic protection or not on these lines. And then they're going to go out and do that soil resistivity testing, at least one in each location. And then create a model with all of that data with both the electric and the water mains. So they can basically look and see, is there going to be a voltage problem either in steady state or in a fault condition? Then they're going to provide mitigation recommendations and give us a report. Additionally, we have asked them to provide any recommendations for worker safety that we can use or moving forward with all of these electrical crossings that we're seeing. Is there anything specific that we should be doing? Should we only be asking for this on transmission lines like we're doing now? Should we be looking at a lower voltage? Is that going to affect us at all? That kind of thing. So they're going to give us some of those recommendations as well. And I wanted to show you what their mitigation recommendation has been on a couple of these projects. So anywhere where there's an above ground appurtenance, they're recommending that we install 6 inches of crushed limestone gravel around that appurtenance so that you will not be grounded yourself. If something does happen, you will not be the shortest course to ground.
You definitely don't want to be that.
Right. So that's basic. It's a pretty simple fix that we can do to kind of keep ourselves safe. So we have chosen RK&K as our design engineer. They have been doing these reports for Dominion, so we know that they have the capacity to do the work. You can see the fee breakdown here. The the modeling is basically the largest amount of time and effort it's going to take them. So that's where the majority of the money is. Our project schedule, so as soon as we get approval, we'll start the data collection, the soil testing, and then we will go through and create this model, which is going to take 5.5 months. It takes a while to look through all of the as-builts and figure out exactly what we have in the ground. Then they'll do some mitigation recommendations and write us a report. So we expect this will be done about this time next year. This is the project snapshot. We put in almost 1.3 million for this effort, which also includes any mitigation that we're going to have to do in the future.
Yeah, this is just the study.
Right, this is just the study.
And if I understand correctly, this is a time and materials study
Yes,
cost as opposed to hardware.
yes. If they don't take as long to make the model or whatever, they can't bill us for that.
Right. They bill by the unit.
Mm-hmm.
Have we ever had anybody zapped by one of these?
I have heard field workers have their hair stand on end and get a little bit of a kind of like you rub your feet on the carpet, but nothing substantial. So this is my recommended motion.
Because I know when I used to work in the field, we'd have problems with homeowners grounding their service to a service line.
Mm,
And then when you cut the service line, there's a spark that would shoot from one end to the other.
Ooh.
We used to have our guys all wearing rubber gloves and whatever they touch the service.
So is it grounded or putting the neutral on the service line?
No, I think they grounded it to the service line. That's the way I understand
Yeah,
it.
wow, yeah.
My knowledge of electrical stuff is nil, but. And literally there'd be a spark would shoot between the two ends of the service line.
That's not proper installation.
That'd get your attention.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to ground it to the service line.
No,
but
no,
they
that's
did.
where you have a post at the ground.
I was just curious, you mentioned several instances where some of the workers or staff have had the hair stand on or that electric current feeling. Does that indicate any sign of resistivity in that area? Has any study been done to, just curious?
I'm sure it's some kind of magnetic field that's
Yeah.
making that
I'm
happen.
just curious.
I think our risk and safety team, we had Dominion come in and talk to us about safety when we started, going through these reports, and their recommendation is to try and stay 50 feet away from any line. So a lot of these transmission lines are pretty high up in the air, so that's sort of easy to accomplish.
Okay.
But they did recommend grounding the trucks. So if you park a truck under the line, grounding the line. So risk and safety is working on getting that kind of PPE for us.
And there are some soils around, is often closer to the ocean, but some soils near lakes and things that do have a different potential. And you can get shocked by touching a wet rock. Because it's not much of a shock,
Yeah.
but and of course they're going to blame Dominion and Loud Water and other people, but it's the physics of the planet we live on. So I'm ready to make the motion if you'd like.
Yes,
Chair?
please.
All right. I'm going to make the recommended motion and we're going to put it on the consent agenda. I move the recommendation to the board to award a study task order for the electrical shock and corrosion study to RK&K LCC for $287,561 with an approximate 5% contingency to be controlled by the general manager for a total authorized budget of $301,940. Additional costs will require board approval. Consent, please.
Just one correction, LLC, not LCC.
Oh,
I think
right.
you must have gotten a shock.
It must have. That's very shocking. LLC.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye. Okay, the motion passed.
Next.
The next one, approval of design services task order, Luckett's wastewater treatment plant upgrades.
15, north of Leesburg, and I'm here seeking approval for a design task order for the upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant. This is not foreign to the board, right? I believe we brought forward possibly the request from the county, our due diligence study, as well as the agreement. So that agreement was executed this year, and it was really between Loudoun County, Loudoun Water, and Loudoun County Public Schools, and it outlined the process for us taking over the service area in Luckett's and becoming the owner of the wastewater treatment facility. The agreement outlined a lot of good steps for us in executing this. Is payment of the revenue equalization fee, or the REF. It outlined land use permits, getting the commission permit and the special exception. Talked about the new customer process and how these 4 existing connections had to come to Loudoun Water and apply, and then talked about facility upgrades. The facility upgrades are required to meet Loudoun Water design standards as applied to our EDM and maybe our experience. So how do we know kind of what we're going to ask for? So in 2023, we did a facility evaluation that serves as the basis of this scope of work we're going to discuss today. We evaluated process components, electrical systems, chemical systems, structure, and facility support systems. Think about it, being a structure on LCPS property, probably not secure, probably a little different feel than if we take it over. We identified several upgrades. Some of them are process capacity increases. We want to change the chemical systems. We want to add those security components, and we want to kind of extend our own communication services. Right now, everything's routed to the schools naturally because it's a support building. We need to decouple that and bring it straight to us. We engaged Corolla, who did that feasibility report, to provide us a scope of work for doing these design upgrades. We kind of break it down into 4 distinct buckets. We have project management efforts, design services. Please note that the majority of design services fall under the 2, chemical system design, as well as the membrane process tank upgrades. Though adding a tank is simple, we do have electrical and instrumentation considerations that need to be accounted for in the hours for design. There's permitting, the county's getting the commission permit as well as special exception, but we'll need to go ahead and do an updated site plan. And of course, the consultant's going to help us through bid phase services, address any questions that come up, and provide conformed documents. Here's the associated fee breakdown. Generally, most of the effort is in the design of drawings, specification development, cost estimating portion of the work, which is where we expect it. We didn't really expect to do the permitting aspect. That would be done through a subconsultant J2. We thought, since the school just went through the effort a couple of years ago, that the county, through a county project, would kind of allow us to let that site plan resist, but we need to update it for the commission permit. So that's included, and there's some benefits for us owning that process.
Mhm.
Additionally, this whole entire effort will be reimbursed by Loudoun County as dictated through the agreement.
We like that.
Here's our project schedule. We hope to go finish design about end of this year and go into the bid phase early next year's and bring this item back to this committee early next year. We do expect about a year and a half for construction.
Just one brief question on the permitting. Is it county and state permitting or just county permitting?
Just counting. So through state permitting, at least when it comes to, DEQ permit, we can just transfer that. It's just administratively. And then with most of the construction already completed, a lot of our upgrades are inside the fence. So we don't expect much in a way of like, maybe stormwater control items like that.
And this is all on county land.
Yeah.
Yeah, except for that one, that's the old
Correct.
firehouse.
Yeah, but no service lines already exist and we treat them as private
As is.
laterals.
Yeah.
Here's the CIP project snapshot. We track this as COM 74, and we have a 10-year CIP budget of $780,000 for design and construction. Finally, here's the recommend motion with the 5% contingency.
You want to make the motion again?
No, I'm gonna ask my friend here too, but because I said LCC, Loudoun Community College, and didn't mean that. So the question I have is design and construction. So you think that the construction will be just close to $500,000? That's all?
That's what that's stemmed out from the feasibility evaluation done by Carollo. That was 2023. I think, we believe so, but we're going to find out, right? There's a lot of assumptions since 2023. We saw like the increased prices as well as trying to understand what the project is. I think this design scope of work is a little heavier than we thought, mainly because the site plan, including the site plan, as well as, just those considerations for instrumentation and control. That takes some hours to do.
Yeah, we can hardly use a backhoe for $500,000.
I agree.
All right, I'm exaggerating, but yes.
I had a question. Sometimes familiar with the term revenue equalization. Oh, yeah, okay. I'm just not familiar with the term revenue equalization fee, REF. That's not
Yes.
familiar with that term.
So that is a COMSIS definition for lowering the rates for people that, lack of a better word, subsidized by central system.
Okay. One thing I would request, if you could put it, define the acronym, because I'm not sure if the other board members know. I've just never heard of that term before.
Yeah.
Just lay it out here.
They've thrown it out before.
Okay.
The most important one is that the county's paying for it.
Okay.
That's right.
Correct.
That's who pays, right?
It's important. Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
We're here for the ratepayers.
Who wants to make a motion? Anybody?
I move the recommendation to the board to award a design task order for the Luckett's wastewater treatment plant upgrades to Carollo Engineers, Inc. for $255,606 with an approximate 5% contingency to be controlled by the general manager for a total authorized budget of $270,000. Additional costs will require board approval.
And that would be to the consent agenda.
Yes, sir.
And all
Second.
in favor? Oh, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, the third item is approval of contract award service task order for Milestone Reservoir. Contract.
That's a great place to start. Morning, everyone. I, like was said, I am bringing task order number 2 for Black and Veatch for construction administration and inspection services for Milestone Reservoir and Pump Station. And I'd like to focus a little bit on that too, or as it's been called before, year 2 component of the action there. As we get into the agenda, typically we do bring task orders with budget to cover the entirety of construction projects for construction administration. For this one, we took a little bit of a different approach. And the thought was that we'd be able to sort of confirm our starting assumptions during the first year of coverage, see what worked, what didn't, and really be able to right size each subsequent request that we bring to the committee for approval. Additionally, it has the added benefit of allowing us to sort of check in on the financial status of our CA and design engineering services during construction. And so that's what we are here today to do. And I think I'll start by providing a little recap of the team structure at Milestone. I think when we brought this back in November, end of 2023, Mr. Vega, I don't think you were part of the committee yet at that point. So feel free to stop me to clarify anything on this org chart. But the sort of the summary of it is that you can think of it as Arcadis is providing design services during construction, more on the technical side of the efforts to support our team. Black & Veatch is providing construction administration and quality assurance, right? So that includes inspection, materials testing services, specialty inspections such as welding inspections, things like that, right? So today, obviously, we are focusing on this right side of the structure here and seeking approval for that second task order for Black & Veatch. So a little bit of an expansion upon the role for Black & Veatch on this project. They were on board with us from the design and pre-construction phases, acting as our professional advisors for the work, and also helped us to develop our CMAR contract and become some sort of our CMAR subject matter expert, right? Our first CMAR project, we needed somebody to sort of shepherd things along on that front, right? So that expertise and familiarity is leveraged when providing these services. And it also, on the quality assurance part, it also helps keep that quality assurance sort of as a third party component, right? Not performed by the engineer, sort of the third party CM that we see on other projects at times. So when we built the fee from the ground up for the entirety of the work, we determined, based on the assumptions developed at the time, that we were looking somewhere in the region of $7 million to provide services across the entire 54-month construction period, sort of 4.5 years, if you will. What we found when we sized that first task order, we were hoping to get coverage for 12 months. We were able to make that last through 17 months in actuality. So there was efficiency in the execution, but there was also some assumptions about how much inspection we would need to supplement our team that ultimately proved to be a little conservative. And so we were able to, from there on out, revise our assumptions and determine that for really, we're sizing this to get us through the end of 2026. So for the next year and a half, we will need around 1.9. And then we decided as we developed that to include all of the materials testing services provided by a subconsultant Triad. The thinking there being that we wanted to lock in the rates for the current rates for those services. So we know things are getting only more expensive by the day. But also we have a much more clear idea of what we will need for those. It's a very sort of discrete, definable scope, as opposed to some of the assumptions that we make about inspection availability and you know how many claims we'll get and things like that, right? So that's the request we're bringing forward today. 1.9 to bring us to the end of 2026. That's the next 18 months, and then leaving third task order for the future. At that time, we'll be getting into the startup and commissioning phase of the project. We'll have learned some more things, and we'll bring that final request for approval for the committee. But at this time, we're sort of thinking that if we stay on track with the current rate of efficiency, we might land somewhere in the region of 5 to 5.25 million. Which would represent obviously a pretty good savings over our original budget here. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Any questions?
I have one. You want to go? Go ahead. Oh, so even though we're doing this motion, the vendor rate hasn't changed. The hourly rate hasn't changed. It stayed the same?
There is an escalation clause built into our BOA.
BOA. Got it. Okay.
And so
that's-
basically, instead of extrapolating for multiple years,
So
the
it
nice
is-
thing about it is that we can just fix it on the performance index for that year.
So it's based on the BOA contract.
That's
perfect.
correct.
That's perfect.
So if that
That's-
fluctuates, we also have the opportunity to incorporate that as well.
It isn't like a new contract.
Correct.
Good deal.
Are you finding the labor distribution between CA and inspections and testing to be a 2-to-1 ratio with the 1.5 that you've spent, or is it 50-50, or is it?
Not necessarily. So we had on-site full-time presence for the first year. For construction administration, you can sort of think of it as staff augmentation for our PM efforts. Obviously, with such a large project, that's pretty standard arrangement. That really represents the bulk of the effort. Inspections, Black and Veatch has been really flexible and available. For instance, now that we're getting into that 42-inch pipe installation and those welding services have upticked, they've been bringing out inspections for that, as well as specialty bridge inspections, things like that. So it's really more heavy on the CA,
Okay.
I would say.
Thank you.
Good to know.
So I promised a report on how we are doing across the board on the construction space spending here. For Arcadis, what we found is we've spent 25% as of April of 2025. Compare that against a 31% time elapsed to final completion for the overall project duration. And it suggests that we are spending efficiently on that front as well. And I'll say with some of the improvements that we've made to the schedule to bring concurrency on the mining efforts, and considering that we are slightly ahead of schedule in the overall execution, I would say we're doing pretty well on the Arcadis side, as well as on the Black and Veatch side, where we've spent, again, 19%. This is based on the budget that we thought we would spend for the total 7 million, 19% across 31% of project time elapsed here. So things are looking pretty good on the CA and design services front. On CMAR, as we know, Clark is slightly ahead of schedule, and that concurrency in those mining efforts have represented a trend of overspending from what we thought we would see at the first third of the project. But we expect that to sort of taper down and converge as we get into the later phases of pump station construction and everything else.
Sam, Mr. Allen has a question.
Mr. Allen?
Thank you, Sam. I'm looking at the FEMA grant reimbursement. Have we noticed any slowdown or delays or in trouble at getting reimbursement on this grant?
It's the last item on my notes here, and
Okay.
I was anticipating the question, and then I'll not bury the lead. We were concerned.
right.
And we did see a brief disruption, but the money just started coming back in. The reimbursements are being processed. And I think the disruption that we saw, while we might have been worrying about the obvious challenges that are being faced on the federal sector, it had more to do with staffing over at VDEM and FEMA, and some deployments that they had made for the staff that was assigned to our projects. So we were able to really engage with them and work through that. And in actuality, I didn't want to, jump the gun, but we are expecting a large reimbursement that'll bring this up to close to 3 million here eminently. So yeah, there was a little bit of a slowdown, but they are fulfilling ultimately the reimbursement of the grant.
Do we have the ability to somehow accelerate the reimbursement schedule, or is it really, milestone driven?
The terms of the agreement set a fixed rate based on our spending. So
Okay.
as we spend, we get a fixed percentage back that we really, it's sort of set in stone, if you will, at this time. It'll reach a point in the construction where it's all reimbursed, but FEMA was careful to set that percentage so that we only recuperate the full 10 million towards the end of the project. So unfortunately, I think that makes it so that it's based really on execution.
Okay,
And
thank you.
The language of the grant is multi-year, so it's funded. It would be very difficult for them to make a change to it.
Correct.
Great.
And I think that's
Can
it.
we go back to the previous? The obvious question on CMAR, the percent spent is 37% versus, I assume, 31% for the whole project.
The 31% time elapsed to final completion.
And CMAR, you spent 37. Why
Correct.
the
So
increase?
the original plan was to build or mine out tunnels A, B, and C sequentially. There was an opportunity identified during execution to mine out tunnel C from the quarry inward instead of doing one tunnel, sink shaft, second tunnel, sink shaft, third tunnel. That bit of work alone was upwards of $10–11 million and was sort of brought forward, accelerated on the schedule to happen concurrently
Okay.
to the mining of Tunnel B. That on top of, we are generally ahead of schedule on execution is why we are seeing that difference. But I would expect that to diverge as we move into the later phases of construction.
So did they find the rock harder or softer than they expected?
They were ready for the challenges
With the
that the
challenge,
diabase posed for them.
Pretty tough stuff.
So those challenges were initially built in and it wasn't, the rock getting through the boring wasn't as difficult as they were thinking.
The hardness of the rock itself was pretty well understood.
Mhm.
I think the risks that we were considering were, you have the confluence of the Goose Creek and Sycolin in that very area where we're mining our shafts and tunnels. We didn't know how the faults were going to sort of align with our work, and that could have,
Oh, there were certain risks that you were anticipating.
as Savita liked to say during pre-construction days, hopefully we don't drain the creeks into our shaft when we start mining.
So those risks were not realized.
They were not realized.
Understood.
And we had a
Yeah.
geotechnical baseline report prepared.
Gotcha.
I don't think we saw a single claim for excess influx of water
Okay.
into our excavation areas.
Nice pleasant surprise then, huh?
Yeah.
We've been lucky so far.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's good news. And the FEMA grant is good news.
Oh, you're not lucky. It was by design.
Well planned, right?
Not luck.
Oh, we like to stay humble, right?
I guess I'll read this one since we'll spread the wealth.
Yes.
I move the recommendation to the board to approve a task order for construction administration inspection services for the Milestone Reservoir and Pump Station project to Black and Veatch for $1,885,855. Additional costs will require board approval and placing on consent agenda.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Capital spending report. I guess, are there any questions?
It's tracking.
You can't track much closer than that.
You can't, yeah. Well, actually, it looks like it's slightly above, and that's okay.
One line.
Well, that's my.
All right,
my
I-
role. Stand back.
I guess that's it.
All right.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.